Hi, my name's Adeline, and if you've ever had someone you love look you in the eye, then throw scalding soup across your face, you'll understand why I didn't say a word. My own mother told me to hand over my car and credit card, not to her, but to her stepdaughter. Give her all your things, or get out. I got out. I left behind the house I helped pay for, the family dinners I used to cook, the silence I thought meant peace. But when they came back, the house was empty, and a man in a suit was waiting for them, inside. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening? And where from? Drop a comment, because this story might make you wonder how far you'd go before saying enough. They say mornings tell the mood of a house, that if you wake up tense, it's because something's already wrong. That Tuesday, I opened my eyes before the sun had fully claimed the kitchen. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. I padded downstairs in my socks, the old wood cool beneath my heels. The house still smelled faintly of lemon oil and last night's garlic bread. I had scrubbed the counters twice, not for hygiene, just to keep myself moving. I cracked the window, let in a sliver of suburban Sacramento's morning chill, and started the kettle. I didn't touch the coffee machine. That was always Evelyn's territory. As the toast popped, I reminded myself, Vera was coming. Again, my mother's stepdaughter. My father had passed before she arrived. She wasn't blood, but you'd never know that from how Evelyn treated her. The praise, the babying, the our girl tone in her voice. I'd tried not to let it get to me, but the past few months, it had become unbearable. Still, I buttered toast, made oatmeal, warmed leftover soup from the night before, Evelyn's favorite. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just avoid another eruption. Evelyn came down around 9, housecoat dragging, eyes sharp behind her glasses. She didn't say good morning, just sat, spooned oatmeal into her bowl, and sipped loudly. I waited. The pause was too long. She was working herself up. Finally, she looked at me. Her voice was sweet, but the kind of sweet you only hear right before poison hits your gut. Vera's stopping by around 10. She's having such a hard time lately, Evelyn said as if I didn't know. I nodded once. Neutral, non-committal. She continued, tone dipping into business. She'll need your car today. And your card. Just until she gets settled with work. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. I'm sorry? You don't use the car during the week. You work remote now. And the card? It's time you did something useful. She's family too, you know. I swallowed. Not the oatmeal. My anger. No, I said gently. I'm not giving her my car. Or my card. I've helped enough. Evelyn's eyes narrowed like I'd just spat in her cereal. You think you're better than her? With your online job and fancy notebooks? This is about family. She's trying. You're hoarding. I kept my voice level. I'm not hoarding. I'm surviving, and I've given this family more than you remember. She stood. She'll be here soon, she snapped. Give her all your things, or get out. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't a conversation. It was a command. I didn't respond, just turned off the stove. Then came the sound of the soup pot scraping against the burner. I turned. Too late. The soup, still hot, arced through the air like a scalding wave. It hit my cheek, soaked my blouse, burned into my shoulder. But what stung more wasn't the heat. It was the clarity. She threw soup at me. Her daughter wasn't even here yet, and Evelyn had chosen her. Violently. I didn't scream, didn't flinch. I simply stood there, soup dripping from my collar. I stared at the woman who had given birth to me, who now glared like I was trespassing in a house I helped pay off. I remembered when the deed changed hands last year. Evelyn said she was simplifying the paperwork. I hadn't argued. I thought, stupidly, that peace was worth the cost. Apparently, peace meant surrender. I walked upstairs, slowly, wet, silent. In my room, I took the small bag I used for overnights, packed only what was mine, truly mine, a pair of jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. There, Tucked under old birthday cards was the cloth napkin my father embroidered when I turned 15. I see you. His handwriting, his stitching. I folded it carefully, placed it at the very top. No yelling, no note, no farewell. Downstairs, I heard the garage door creak open. Vera's SUV. Timing, poetic and cruel. I didn't wait to see her. I didn't want to hear her, "Oh no, what happened here?" in that false, sugary voice. I walked past the kitchen. Evelyn didn't follow. Maybe she thought I'd return. Maybe she thought shame would pull me back like it always had. I reached the front door. Soup clung to my blouse, but my back was straight. I held my car key tight and walked to the curb. The wind had picked up. It felt clean. I opened the door, sat, turned the key, and I didn't look back. I didn't call anyone. I just kept driving. Around corners I didn't recognize, past intersections I normally rolled through without thought. But today, none of it felt familiar. The silence in the car was thick. Even the engine sounded like it was holding its breath. My hands stayed at 10 and 2, like some first-time driver on her test. I wasn't sure if it was the soup drying on my chest or the words echoing louder now than when she'd first spoken them. Give her all your things, or get out. No trembling, no tears, just a steady emptiness settling somewhere deep in my stomach. I didn't know where I was headed. I just knew I couldn't go back. An hour later, I pulled into a small cafe on the edge of a strip mall, one of those places that serves burnt coffee but has free Wi-Fi and nobody bothers you if you sit too long. I didn't go in. I sat in my car, engine off, watching the reflection of myself in the rearview mirror. The soup stain had turned stiff, dried against my collarbone. My face was still blotchy, not from crying, just from heat and disbelief. How did I become the outsider in my own life? The last time I felt like this, I'd been standing in the back aisle of our family's grocery store, just 4 weeks ago. It was a Thursday. I was restocking shelves in the canned goods section when I heard the jingle of heels and exaggerated laughter coming down the main aisle. Vera. Her voice always carried like it belonged to someone used to being overheard. She wore a blouse too white for a grocery store and heels too high for walking, let alone managing. Evelyn followed behind her with the pride of a mother escorting her daughter to prom. "Everyone meet our new store manager, Vera Campbell," Evelyn announced like we were at a press conference, not next to a discount bin of lentils. No one looked at me, not even Vera. Not really. She just smiled that practiced, tight-lipped grin of hers, then walked right into the back office like she'd been working there for years. I waited. I waited for Evelyn to look at me, to say something, anything. Instead, she patted my shoulder and whispered, "Take some time off, sweetie. You've been running yourself thin. Let Vera handle things now." I wasn't fired. I wasn't demoted. I was erased. Back in the car, I pulled my phone from the console and opened the family Facebook group. New notification, Campbell Legacy, Women of Strength album uploaded by Evelyn. I clicked. Photo after photo, Vera smiling, Vera organizing, Vera leading morning staff meetings in the break room I used to unlock every day at 6:30 a.m. There was a photo of the Thanksgiving display I had designed last year, cornucopia, twinkle lights, seasonal color palette, the whole thing. Caption read, "Vera's first fall installation, brilliant work." I stared at it so long I forgot to breathe. My thumb trembled as I scrolled further. Then I stopped. One photo caught my eye. A family dinner, our dining room table, my serving bowls, the menu I had prepared down to the wine pairing. And the caption? "Beautiful evening hosted by Vera for the whole family. Her warmth brings us together." It felt like someone had dug their hand inside my chest and rearranged the truth. I wasn't even in the frame. And yet, it was my food, my candles, my home. I set the phone down. The screen stayed lit for a second longer before fading to black. I didn't even know where I was driving until the old sign came into view. Campbell Market, since 1973. My father opened that store with one freezer and a dream. After his stroke, I turned it around, rebranded it, grew it, made it matter again. Now, stretched across the front windows was a new banner, founded by Evelyn and Vera Campbell. I parked across the lot, didn't get out. Inside, I could see a teenage cashier folding paper bags. A few regulars strolled the aisles. I knew every shelf in that place, every creak in the floorboards, every staff birthday. My father once told me, not long before he passed, "Keep the ledger. Someday it'll matter more than you think." I kept it, the original paper ledger, tucked away in a storage box under my bed, his handwriting. Every early sale, every inventory slip, every check signed by him, long before Vera even entered our lives. And now his name wasn't even on the front window. That night, after circling a few more blocks to clear my head, I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there for a long time before I sent the message. To Clara, my old co-worker, the only one who'd ever said what I never dared say aloud. "Me. I think it's time," she responded almost instantly. "Clara, I always knew they were pushing you out. I saved something for you. Come by." That was all she wrote, but it was more than enough. I typed her address into the GPS. She lived maybe 15 minutes away. I turned the ignition, pulled out onto the road, and let the soft glow of the street lamps guide me towards something that finally resembled direction. As I stopped at a red light, something shifted in the trunk behind me. I didn't have much with me, just that one box. But I heard the corner of something slide. In the rearview mirror, I caught the edge of it peeking out, the napkin. "I see you," it whispered again. I smiled, not with joy, but with clarity. "Let's see how much history they've rewritten," I murmured. Clara didn't say anything at first. She just stood in the doorway, eyes filled with something heavier than sympathy. She held out a manila envelope. "I didn't know who else to trust with this," she said. "I've had it for a while." I stepped inside slowly, my legs stiff from the long drive and my thoughts more tangled than ever. Her home smelled like lemon oil and cedar, clean and grounded. I hadn't realized how much I missed that feeling. I opened the envelope right there in her foyer. Inside was a copy of a document I'd never seen before. It looked official, notarized. My name was printed at the bottom, followed by what was supposed to be my signature. "Asset Consolidation Transfer Agreement," the title read. According to this paper, I had signed over my stake in the grocery store to Evelyn. The date? Just 1 month before Vera strolled in with her clipboard and fake smile. "That's not my signature," I whispered. My voice sounded too small for the walls around us. Clara nodded. I figured. I watched Vera hand it to Evelyn. Some notary guy was there too, but he barely looked up. Didn't ask for ID, didn't check anything, just stamped and walked. I felt the heat start in my chest. I wasn't just erased. I was erased on paper, with fake ink and official stamps, legally invisible, conveniently removed. I couldn't breathe right for a few seconds. Then Clara put a hand on my arm. "I still have the key to your storage unit," she said. "I kept it just in case. Thought maybe one day you'd need it." I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. We left 10 minutes later. The drive was quiet except for the wind outside and the rattling inside my chest. The unit was exactly as I'd left it, a low-cost rental in the industrial side of town, steel door, dusty keypad, and that strange metallic scent that always reminded me of garage sales and forgotten history. Clara unlocked it while I held my breath. Inside were the remnants of my past life, old holiday decorations, childhood keepsakes, boxes of paper I never had time to sort, and near the back, under a tarp, was the crate I'd packed after Dad died. We pulled it out together. There it was, the original ledger, leather-bound, worn from use. Inside, years of my handwriting, purchase orders, tax filings, staff payment logs, signed by me, all of them. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the crate, half-tucked between 2 old recipe binders, was a torn envelope. My name was scrawled in my father's handwriting. The flap was already open. I pulled out the letter slowly, careful not to tear the fragile paper. It was dated 2 weeks before his stroke. The ink had faded a little, but the message was clear. If anything ever feels wrong, go to Mr. Thatcher. He helped me protect what matters most. I left instructions. He knows where everything is. Trust him, Adeline." I pressed the letter to my chest, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with clarity. He knew. He'd known they'd come for it, that they'd come for me, and he'd left a trail in case I ever had to fight. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't being dramatic like they always claimed. Clara stood nearby, wiping her eyes. We didn't say much after that. Just packed the ledger, the letter, and the envelope into a cloth bag and drove straight to downtown. Clara looked up the number in the letter. Mr. Thatcher still practiced law out of a modest brick office sandwiched between a dental clinic and a notary service. That irony wasn't lost on me. We walked in together, but I asked to speak to him alone. He looked to be in his 70s now, silver hair, still sharp-eyed, with a firm handshake that made me feel steadier than I had in weeks. "You're Adeline," he said, not even asking. "I was wondering when you'd come." He pulled a locked drawer open behind his desk, took out a thin black folder with my father's initials embossed in gold. Inside were copies of the store's original ownership documents. Before Evelyn had ever touched a single can of beans, before Vera ever learned to pronounce inventory. Then he flipped the page. It was a notarized letter from my father, dated years ago. "My daughter, Adeline, retains majority control of Campbell Market. If ownership is ever disputed, refer to the primary ledger in her hand. Her signature alone carries final say." I didn't blink. Mr. Thatcher leaned back in his chair and studied me. "You ready to assert your legal rights?" he asked calmly, like he'd been waiting years to say those words. I took a long breath, let it settle in my lungs. Then I looked down at the napkin I'd tucked into my coat pocket, its edges worn soft. I folded it slowly, deliberately, and looked him straight in the eyes. "Yes," I said, "but I'm not just coming for the store." He tilted his head, curious. "Oh?" "I'm coming for every single piece they tried to steal, and every lie they fed people to cover it." He smiled then, not out of amusement, but recognition. Like he'd seen this moment bloom in other women before. He tapped the folder with a pen. "Good, because the person who forged this," he held up the fraudulent transfer agreement, "is about to regret putting ink to paper." I nodded once. "Let's begin." While Mr. Thatcher dialed his first call, I sat in the corner of his office, scrolling through my phone's contacts with a strange, unfamiliar calm. There was only one name I knew I had to tap. I hadn't spoken to her since she graduated 2 years ago, but I remembered her quiet, nervous smile and the way she'd always hesitate before hitting send on emails Vera dictated to her. Lila. I sent a simple message. "Hi, it's Adeline. Something's come up. Can we talk?" She replied before I could even put the phone down. "Yes, I thought this day might come." 2 mornings later, I pulled into the Sacramento Public Library parking lot just after 10. I needed to print and organize every piece of documentation Mr. Thatcher requested before our next step. I wasn't just building a case, I was preparing to take back the truth. The printer room was quiet. I logged into my old email, navigating to a folder I hadn't opened in nearly a year, my resume files. I'd updated it regularly when I still hoped to apply for nonprofit boards or maybe consult for another grocer chain. I downloaded the last version, hit print, and waited for the humming sound of the machine, but something caught my eye, an attachment in a public county filing that had popped up in a Google alert a week ago. I hadn't checked it until now. I clicked. My stomach twisted. It was my resume. Same layout, same bullet points, even the phrasing I used when describing the outreach program I'd built after Dad's stroke. Only the name at the top wasn't mine. It was Vera's. They'd submitted it in a public funding proposal for a state grant, claiming she had founded and run Campbell Market's community initiatives. I stood motionless, my hand still resting on the printer lid. This wasn't just stealing credit. This was state fraud. With my name scrubbed clean, like I'd never been there. Never existed. I didn't move until the librarian walked by and cleared her throat softly, reminding me where I was. The printed resume slid out. I folded it carefully, slid it into a folder, and walked back to my car like I was moving underwater. By noon, I was sitting across from Lila at a small cafe in Curtis Park. She looked older, more confident than I remembered, but her eyes still held that hesitant edge, like she'd been waiting for someone to say it's okay to tell the truth now. "I saved some of the emails," she said after our drinks arrived. "I didn't mean to spy. Vera always made me feel like I was doing something wrong, even when I was just typing what she told me." I nodded slowly. "You don't have to explain, Lila. I know what that pressure feels like." She slid her phone across the table. Screenshots. Dozens. Emails labeled, "Draft from Audilyn, delete after and rewrite with my name." Even attachments I remembered composing with my style of phrasing and internal notes. "You knew they were using these?" I asked. She shrugged. "I thought maybe it was approved. Evelyn was always talking about how we need to clean up Audilyn's legacy and make the store future-facing." I leaned back. Legacy. They were turning me into a ghost, one they could plagiarize freely and then bury. "Would you be willing to forward these?" I asked. Lila nodded without hesitation. "I already have. I sent them to a personal backup account. You can share them however you need." Later that afternoon, after I dropped Lila off and thanked her quietly, I pulled into the parking lot behind Thatcher's office. From the front, the building looked like any other aging legal suite. Quiet brick, curtained windows, a sign that had faded from too many summers, but inside, change was moving. I handed him the screenshots and Vera's resume filing. He read through them, pausing only to raise an eyebrow. "This is damning," he muttered. "We needed one more trigger. This is it." We moved into the private conference room in the back. He'd scheduled a sit-down with a retired judge, neutral, well-respected, and still licensed to mediate disputes. His presence was meant to send a message. We're not just upset, we're organized. The mediator's voice was calm and measured as he reviewed the evidence. I sat silently through it all, letting the swirl of facts and forged documents speak for me. No crying, no raised voice, only the weight of proof, and the absence of my name in places it should have been. As the meeting ended, Mr. Thatcher began drafting a formal packet. Not a lawsuit, not yet, but a detailed summary of everything we had, set to be sent to Evelyn and Vera's shared address. The tone was professional. The intent was crystal clear. "You have 24 hours to respond before we escalate this to court," it read. I added something of my own, a yellow post-it note, square and neat, on top of the folder. "For your records and your conscience." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the sky dulled to lavender, I sat on the edge of my motel bed, waiting. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "You don't want to do this. You know how this family handles disobedience." I stared at it, then deleted it without replying. They were still using the same language. Disobedience. As if I'd ever signed up for their hierarchy. As if protecting what's mine made me a traitor. I powered the phone off and reached for the napkin folded neatly beside my bag. But the next message? The one they didn't expect? It was already written, drafted, scheduled, sent not just to Vera, but to the very funding board they'd filed the resume with. Because when you threaten someone who's already walked through fire, they don't flinch. They get strategic. By the time I stepped out of Mr. Thatcher's office, the sun had begun to dip behind the Sacramento skyline. I didn't go home. I didn't even head back to the motel. I just drove until the highway lights blurred into the kind of silence only someone betrayed could sit with comfortably. Then, late Friday afternoon, Evelyn called. Her voice was as syrupy as it was sharp. "We're having dinner Sunday, just the family. I think it's time we talked this through, before you embarrass yourself any further." There it was again, that need to control the narrative. Even now, after everything I'd uncovered, she spoke like I was the one making a mess. I didn't respond right away. When I told Mr. Thatcher, he gave me a look that didn't need words. I beat him to it. "I'm going." He didn't argue, just leaned back in his chair and said, Then go prepared. Let them show you who they are one more time. I chose my clothes carefully that night. Nothing flashy. Just a dark navy dress and the old wristwatch my father gave me the Christmas before his stroke. The leather band was worn and cracked, but the second hand still ticked. Quiet, defiant. Just like I planned to be. The restaurant was one of those polished places in Folsom with chandeliers and linen napkins that tried too hard. The kind of place Evelyn only booked when she wanted to prove something to outsiders, or shame someone within. When I arrived, the hostess paused, checked the reservation, and gestured vaguely to the back. "Your party's already seated," she said. "You'll be over this way." We weaved past elegant couples and glowing wine glasses until we reached the last table near the hallway to the restrooms. Not a single centerpiece, not even a breadbasket. And there she was, Vera, seated at the head, right in the spot I used to take at every family occasion, laughing, wearing that gold wrap dress Evelyn always claimed was too flashy for family settings, unless, of course, Vera wore it. I stood for half a second too long. A waiter hovered awkwardly. I cleared my throat and asked, "Is there another seat available, perhaps closer to the center?" Before he could respond, Evelyn turned her head just slightly and snapped, "Don't be difficult, Adeline, it's just a seat." Just a seat, like it wasn't the physical symbol of every choice she'd made to erase me, to replace me. I smiled. Not warmly. I sat. The evening unfolded in slow motion. Small talk, forced laughter. Vera monopolizing the conversation while Evelyn nodded in approval like a stage mother finally seeing her understudies shine. Then came the toast. Vera stood up, raised her glass, a soft pink rosé that matched her lipstick, and said with a dramatic exhale, "I just want to thank Mom for everything she's done to support me, especially with the car." A round of polite applause broke out. Evelyn dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin and added, "Some people in this family rise to the occasion. Some fall apart, but not you, Vera." I didn't need to check to know every pair of eyes was looking at me, but I did need to check something else. I slid my phone just slightly under the tablecloth, opened the DMV portal, and typed in the plate number she'd just mentioned. It was mine. The same car I'd left behind when I walked out. According to the records, the title had been transferred 3 days after I left. Listed as a gift. My signature, forged. Again. The breath didn't leave me in a gasp. It left in a quiet, steady exhale. I'd stopped expecting shame from any of them. As dessert menus arrived, Evelyn clinked her glass once more. "Some people make this family proud," she said loudly. "Others, they're content to let resentment sour every room they enter." I rose before she could go further. I didn't knock over my chair. I didn't shout. Instead, I turned to the waiter who had been kind enough to refill my water 3 times without a single snide glance and said, "Thank you. You've been the most respectful person at this table." He blinked, surprised, and nodded. Then I turned to Evelyn. "That was your last attempt," I said calmly. "The next thing you receive from me will be notarized." From my purse, I pulled a folded photograph, a black and white copy of the ledger page my father had handwritten years ago, his neat cursive, my name clearly printed in the ownership column. Vera's scribbled over in a different pen, an addition made much later. I placed it on the table between them and straightened my shoulders. This isn't about resentment, it's about reality. I didn't wait for their reaction. I turned to walk. Just as I reached the doorway, Vera hissed behind me, "You've always been jealous of me." I stopped, took a single step back, turned halfway, just enough to meet her eyes. "No," I said softly. "I just finally stopped protecting you from yourself." Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. The stars were sharp and quiet. The valet jogged over with a confused look, holding 2 sets of keys. "This one's yours," he said, handing me the familiar key fob I hadn't seen since the day I left. "But the system registered a backup, name matches. There's a legal update on file, said to give you both." I took them both, tucked them into my purse, and didn't say a word. That Sunday night, as the valet handed me those keys outside the restaurant, I didn't drive off right away. I sat there in the driver's seat with the door still ajar, letting the California night air settle on my skin. The scent of rosemary from the landscaping mixed with the faint perfume still clinging to my collar. Inside, they were still clinking glasses, toasting to Vera, to lies, to everything they thought they'd gotten away with. But I wasn't that quiet girl anymore, the one who always nodded, who always picked up the check, who always gave and never asked. Monday morning came too early, the kind that feels like you never really slept. I was standing in line at a local cafe when my debit card declined. I laughed quietly and tried it again. Declined. I pulled out my backup. Same result. By the time I got to my car, my phone lit up with 3 alerts from the bank. Fraud claim initiated, account frozen, pending investigation. The shared account, my main account, was locked. I didn't need to guess who was behind it, but I called the bank anyway. The voice on the other end was courteous but firm. "Yes, ma'am, we've received a fraud report filed by Evelyn Campbell. She claimed unauthorized use of joint funds. She's the co-signer. I was the primary. That money is mine," I said evenly. "Well, until the review is complete, the funds will remain restricted." Restricted. As if I were the one who had lied. I ended the call and stared at the dashboard. My fingers were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel, my knuckles burned white. 10 minutes later, I was in Mr. Thatcher's office, standing just inside the threshold, holding the printed alerts in one hand. "They froze my money," I said, voice low. He didn't ask for details. He just pointed to the seat across from him and reached for his legal pad. "They're trying to suffocate you," he muttered, scanning the documents. "They won't," I said. "I'll learn to breathe elsewhere." By the time I left his office, he'd filed an emergency financial injunction and had his assistant draft a formal rebuttal with supporting ownership records. But the day wasn't done with me yet. Around lunchtime, as I was walking back to my car after dropping documents at the bank, Clara called. I picked up immediately. "Adeline, I'm so sorry," she said. "The police came by Mom's house this morning." I stopped mid-step. "What?" "They said Evelyn filed a report, claimed you broke in, that you stole things, and that you threatened Vera." I felt my pulse in my throat. Before I could respond, another call buzzed through, this time from an unknown number. I switched over. "Hello?" "Ms. Campbell," a man said professionally. "This is Officer Reed with the Sacramento Police Department. We'd appreciate it if you came in voluntarily to discuss a report filed by Evelyn Campbell. You are not under arrest. We just have some questions." I blinked into the sunlight. "What time?" "Today, if possible." I hung up, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel again. It was becoming familiar, this stillness right before the next punch. By 3 p.m., I was seated in a bland precinct interview room, beige walls, a scuffed table, 2 metal chairs. Mr. Thatcher was beside me, expression unreadable. A young officer entered with a folder and sat across from us. He looked tired, or maybe just bored. He started with pleasantries, then shifted to vague phrasing. "There's been an allegation of property interference, suggestions of aggressive behavior." Mr. Thatcher reached calmly into his briefcase and slid a thick folder across the table. "These are digital timestamps, email trails, financial ledgers, and security footage showing Adeline Campbell has not stepped foot in her mother's residence since..." He flipped to the page, the evening of April 9th. "Further, here are notarized documents indicating she was unlawfully removed from joint business ownership and that her personal vehicle was transferred via forged authorization." The officer flipped through the first few pages. His face changed. We'll be reviewing this thoroughly," he mumbled. "I'm sure you will," Mr. Thatcher said evenly, "and I assume any malicious filing of a false report will also be reviewed thoroughly." No one said much after that. By the time we stepped out into the hallway, dusk had started to stretch across the sky. The elevator pinged, and out walked Vera. Right behind her, Evelyn. She froze when she saw us. I didn't. Our eyes locked. "You wanted me erased," I said, my voice as calm as the air between us. Now I've become indelible. Vera's eyes narrowed. You'll regret dragging this family through the mud. Mr. Thatcher didn't flinch. You should have thought of that before forging 3 signatures. Or maybe that slipped your mind while shopping for a new Lexus. Neither of them spoke, but I saw it then. The first flicker of doubt in Evelyn's eyes. That night, I sat in my rented apartment, a modest 2-bedroom walk-up with creaky floors and fading blinds, and stared at the ceiling. My phone pinged once. It was a message from the bank. Fraud claim invalidated. Access restored. Funds available. I scrolled down. There was an attachment. A screenshot of the DMV system showing Vera's gifted car was now flagged as under legal review. I stared at it for a long time, then whispered into the dark, "We're not done." After everything, after the frozen accounts, the false report, the car title theft, you'd think I'd have gotten used to the quiet before another storm. But the message that came that Friday was different. It was slipped under my apartment door in an unmarked envelope. No return address, no signature, just a typed note on plain printer paper. You might want to show up at tonight's HOA meeting, 6:30 p.m., Room B, Folsom Civic Hall. There was no threat in it. No warmth either, just information, pointed, deliberate, and whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. By 6:10, I was parked in front of the Civic Hall, the sky painted in streaks of pink and amber. The air had that early spring coolness that settles deep in your collarbones. I didn't rush, I didn't rehearse, I didn't even button my coat. I just walked in, quiet and unnoticed, and took the last seat in the back corner of Room B. Up front, Vera was already mid-presentation, standing under a bright projector light like she owned the air in that room. She wore a pale blue blazer, hair pinned perfectly. She was speaking to about 24 residents, her voice chipper, sliding between phrases like neighborhood pride and community restoration. Behind her, on the screen, was a PowerPoint slide titled Beautification Fund, Proposed Sponsors and Partners. One bullet point stood out in bold, Campbell Heritage Market, primary donor and founding business partner. I watched the room shift slightly. Some heads nodded. A few older neighbors I recognized from childhood were listening intently. When Vera asked if there were any questions, I raised my hand. Slowly, intentionally. The room turned. Vera froze mid-blink. "Yes," she said, voice tight. I stood up without smiling. "Could you clarify for the group when exactly you joined the Campbell family business? Because I happen to have tax filings from 2017 to 2022 naming me as the sole contributor and manager." Gasps aren't common in community meetings, but that night I heard one. Vera stammered, "She's just bitter because she walked away." I walked to the front, calm as rain. I placed a single manila folder on the table next to the microphone and said, "These are publicly filed records. Anyone who wants to verify is welcome to." Then I left. No explanation, no defense. Because sometimes the loudest statement is silence backed by evidence. That night, I logged into my old Facebook account, the one I hadn't used since my father's funeral. My profile photo was still from 10 years ago. I updated nothing. I just posted one image, a scanned portion of my father's handwritten will. The caption beneath it read, "Legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you build." It was up for less than 30 minutes before the first 100 comments rolled in. Old employees, former customers, childhood neighbors, people who remembered me at the register, who remembered the remodel after the fire, who remembered me before Vera even stepped foot inside that store. By midnight, screenshots had started circulating. Someone found Vera's social media reel from the week before, claiming she was the co-founder and youngest expansion manager in our family's legacy. They placed it side by side with archived footage from a 2019 news clip. Me, ribbon-cutting the grocery store's remodel in my apron, and like that, her story began to crumble. By sunrise Saturday, 2 local sponsors had pulled their logos from her Instagram bio. The neighborhood Facebook group had removed her from admin status, and her upcoming talk at the local women's entrepreneur breakfast? Cancelled. I didn't gloat. I didn't even log back in. I poured myself a cup of coffee, stared out the window at the quiet street, and let it all settle in. Until the phone rang. It was Evelyn. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. "You've made your point. Enough already. Come to the house. Alone." I pressed delete. 30 minutes later, a text came from Vera. "If you think this makes you look strong, you're delusional." I stared at it for a second, then typed slowly, "I'm not trying to look strong. I just stopped playing weak." I hit send. The rest of the day was quiet until early evening when Mr. Thatcher called. "They've requested a private negotiation," he said. "No lawyers on their side, just the two of them. I think they're scared, Audlin." I stood by my window, my reflection overlaid against the dusk outside. "Good," I said. I tapped the glass gently with my fingernail. "Let's make them sign." The following Thursday, I stood in front of a frosted glass door that read, "Thatcher and Lowell, LLP, Mediation Suite." The hallway smelled of bergamot and money. I wore a black blouse, no makeup, my father's old watch ticking on my wrist like a drum I didn't need to beat. My heels didn't clack. They landed. Inside the room, Evelyn and Vera sat flanked by a young man in an ill-fitting suit, flipping nervously through a yellow legal pad. He barely looked old enough to rent a car, much less negotiate against a woman who had rebuilt a business from cinder block and canned beans. Mr. Thatcher was already standing. He didn't speak, just gave a slight nod like he'd been waiting for me to arrive, like a conductor signaling the final act. "Thank you all for being here," the mediator began, voice flat. "This is a confidential settlement session. All parties have agreed to keep discussions private unless stated otherwise. Let's begin." Vera's attorney launched in, reading from a typed proposal like it was some grand concession. "A modest profit-sharing agreement, contingent on immediate cessation of Audlin's public statements, including social media posts and future claims to ownership. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. No apology. Non-disparagement clause required." Evelyn leaned back in her chair like she'd just extended a favor to a beggar. Her eyes dared me to speak, but I didn't. Instead, I opened the slim leather folder I'd brought and slid it across the table toward the mediator. He passed it to their side without a word. Inside, a set of notarized documents, amendments to my father's will. Vera's hand paused mid-air as she reached for a water bottle. Her smile faltered. The attorney cleared his throat. "We weren't aware there were updated terms." Mr. Thatcher leaned forward, smooth and calm. "It appears the original will was amended 3 months before Mr. Campbell's stroke. This version includes a clause granting exclusive rights of ownership, branding, and derivative property of Campbell Market and its affiliates to his daughter, Audlin, provided she remained active in the business." He flipped the page. "These filings," he continued, "show consistent tax returns, supplier contracts, and employee payroll, all under Audlin's name. Meanwhile, neither Evelyn nor Vera filed any business activity forms in that period." Vera's fingers tightened around her pen. "Which means," Thatcher added, "Ms. Vera's use of that branding in community presentations, sponsorship applications, and social media constitutes intellectual property infringement." A silence so dense filled the room. "You could have folded it." Evelyn broke first. "You manipulated your father when he was weak. He didn't know what he was signing." I turned to her slowly. "Is that how you justify everything, Evelyn? That people are always too weak or too stupid to challenge you?" She opened her mouth again, but I reached into my bag and pulled out one more item, an envelope, torn slightly at the edge. My father's handwriting on the front. I passed it to the mediator, who read it silently before nodding and handing it over. The note was short, unmistakably his. "To my daughter, thank you for protecting the heart of what we built. I trust you'll do what's right, no matter who stands in your way." Vera's carefully powdered face drained of color. She looked suddenly very small in her tailored jacket. I stood slowly, my chair not even creaking. "Here are my terms," I said. "You'll sign over full control of the business name, storefront, and all related marketing materials. You'll retract your claims, both online and in writing. You will not contact me again, not for birthdays, funerals, or second chances." Evelyn's lawyer tried to interject. Mr. Thatcher cut him off with one raised palm. "If not," I added, "we move forward with civil litigation, criminal fraud investigation, and a press release to every outlet in the Tri-County area." The young lawyer paled. Vera reached for her water and spilled half of it across the table. I didn't flinch. 30 minutes later, they signed. I took the final copy in hand and, without a smile, added one last line in blue ink beneath my name. "The gift you demanded was never yours to begin with." As I left the room, I didn't look back, because this wasn't revenge. This was release. 3 months later, I no longer woke up to silence, but to the slow warmth of sunlight pressing through sheer curtains. My apartment was modest. 2 rooms, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in, but it was mine. There was no old clock ticking behind me, no familiar footsteps in the hallway, no one else deciding what counted as home. Just me, a chipped coffee grinder I'd found at a yard sale, and the scent of dark roast rising from the stovetop. I poured my coffee into a new ceramic mug. Clean. Simple. Not the floral porcelain cup Evelyn used to insist I drink from, the one she once called proper. I didn't take anything from that house, not even memories. I was speaking later that morning, nothing fancy, just a local women's event at the library downtown. A quiet gathering focused on financial independence, estrangement, and the work of rebuilding a life after betrayal. They'd asked me to share my story, and I would, but not all of it. On my way out the door, keys in hand, I stopped. A small box sat quietly on the welcome mat. No return address, no note. I carried it in and opened the lid with a careful, steady motion. Inside sat the ceramic soup bowl, the same one from that morning, the one she had hurled at me without flinching. It had been washed, polished, almost reverently packed. I held it for a moment, then set it on the bookshelf between 2 travel journals I hadn't touched in years. Not out of sentiment, not out of guilt, just acknowledgement. A relic, not a wound. That afternoon, standing on the low stage inside the library's main hall, I didn't read from prepared notes. I didn't need them. "I'm not here to expose anyone," I said to the group of women, their eyes quietly locked on mine. "This isn't about blame. This is about what it means to lose your place and still find your footing again." I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I spoke about the erosion, how family can empty you little by little until you forget where you begin and where they end. I talked about the illusion of obligation, about how silence isn't peace, about how pretending to be okay just to keep the room from burning only makes the fire harder to put out later. One woman near the back wiped her cheek and whispered to the person beside her, "That was my story too." After the event, someone pressed my hand in theirs. Someone else asked for the name of my lawyer. I offered them both my email. That night, back in my apartment, I sat down at my small desk, the one I'd thrifted for $40 and sanded myself, and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank post window for a long time, then typed, "Forgiveness is not owed, silence is not consent, and sometimes love is simply letting go before it destroys you." I didn't tag anyone, didn't link the store, the people, the pain. I just posted it. Within hours, the comments started to pour in, not from strangers, but from survivors. One simply said, "You helped me leave." 2 days later, while grabbing paper towels at the grocery store, I turned the corner near aisle 3, and there she was, Evelyn. She was standing in front of the frozen vegetables, staring at a bag of peas like it might open and tell her what to do. She looked older, not weaker, not defeated, just tired. She turned and caught my eye. She didn't speak. Neither did I. But she didn't look through me either. Her gaze met mine, not with malice, not even with regret, just truth, quiet and heavy. I nodded, barely. She blinked, then turned back to the peas. That was it. Some wars end with treaties, others end when you finally stop fighting. That night, I lit a candle and sat back at my desk. On my screen was a Word doc titled, Chapter 1, The Day I Said No. The cursor blinked. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel proud. I just felt free. Because sometimes the story you've waited your whole life to tell starts when you stop waiting for someone else to give you the pen.